Our theme for May is curiosity, the practice of moving from fear to open-heartedness. At the beginning of May, I mentioned in my Time for All Ages that the consensus among psychologists at the moment is that the top 5 motivators of human behavior are, in order from number 1, fear, cognitive overload, greed, curiosity, generosity, connection is number 5. Fear is number 1. The stress related to too much information and being too connected all the time is number 2. And good old greed comes in 3rd. Curiosity and generosity are at the bottom of the list. And here's the thing. When we aren't paying attention, it's very likely that fear, stress, and greed are motivating our actions. As I mentioned to the kids, religion and philosophy have long been about rearranging the order of those motivators. Now, let's say a new family moves in across the street. They speak a language you have never heard. They wear clothing that makes no sense at all to you. And they cook stuff that smells like it died 3 weeks ago. How do you respond? Curiosity or fear? We must examine what we're afraid of and face our fears, because our call is to put curiosity before fear as often as we can, because our goal is being better individuals and being better as social animals. Religions and philosophies help us examine our fear triggers in order to, maybe we hope, act better next time. Because, as Monty Python long ago pointed out, nobody expects which brings me to one of my topics today. Where are the limits of curiosity? Or should curiosity be limited? We know that there is this realm called forbidden knowledge. But should there be? Speaking of the Spanish Inquisition, the Liborum Prohibitorium, book banning, ended in the Roman Catholic Church in 1966. It was not that long ago. The practice ended more from the impossibility of banning books anymore than from the kind of wish that they could. And the church, by the way, still exercises very close control over the theologians in Catholic seminaries. On the flip side, until recently, there was general agreement in secular universities about allowing free speech, the free distribution of knowledge. But as you know, now the radical right has co-opted the academic freedom and free speech arguments for very different ends. And I'll come back to that later. Do a web search on forbidden knowledge, and you're going to find some interesting stuff. The Book of Forbidden Knowledge, Black Magic, Superstition, Charms, and Divination. Forbidden Knowledge, Revelations of a Multi-Dimensional Time Traveler. Forbidden Mysteries, Ancient Knowledge, and Lost Worlds. The Book of Secret Wisdom, The Prophetic Record of Human Destiny. Forbidden Knowledge, From Prometheus to Pornography. The Encyclopedia of Ancient and Forbidden Knowledge. Forbidden Knowledge 101, Things Not Everybody Should Know How to Do. More Forbidden Knowledge, The Most Forbidden Knowledge. And the list does go on. These titles play on those polar opposites of the human mind, fear and curiosity. Now, I have to admit that I have read one of the books on that list. Curious? It was written by the literary critic Roger Shattuck, titled Forbidden Knowledge, From Prometheus to Pornography. Yes, we invent the internet, and it's filled with pornography and cat videos, right? As that book points out, forbidden knowledge is a very old literary trope. Last week, Rev. Jim told the story of Pandora and her box, actually a jar, amphora in Greek, right? Pan in Greek means all, and Dora means gifted or giving. Pandora, all giving. Now, how did a character once seen as all giving become someone credited with releasing evil into the world? I think that might be patriarchy and its twin, misogyny. The Greeks, as they learned about Christianity, immediately saw the similarity of their own myth of Pandora with the Hebrew myth of Eve. Both are women, both are curious, both disobey the will of God. And by the way, is that just code for the will of men? And both are the reason why life kind of sucks these days. They released all of this evil stuff into the world with their curiosity. It's an old answer. Women are curious. It's those women. They question things that ought not be questioned. They examine things that ought not be examined. Women, shouted patriarchy, we'd better keep their curiosity in bounds. Don't educate them. Don't let them out of their houses. Keep them pregnant all the time. And there have been a lot of Alabamas in human history, by the way. Men have long been afraid of the curiosity of women, and in the Euro-Mediterranean world, we don't have a story like the one you told today, right? And there's a reason for that. By the way, the root of the word curiosity is kura, care, and another related word is cure, as in making something better, making something whole again. Now, like Pandora, that sounds like a good thing, doesn't it? Except it's a female thing, isn't it? If you want to keep some knowledge out of the hands of some people for some reason, what are you going to do? Many of you know that this congregation originated in a group trying to fight restrictions in the U.S. mail back in the 1870s. The law restricted obscene literature, which included birth control information, sexual health information, and free thought. The Comstock laws. It was an effort to control knowledge and keep it out of the hands of curious women. And it worked for 80 years. So, a couple of questions. Why, in those foundational myths, do the gods want to keep people in the dark? And why is it predominantly women in those myths that unveil forbidden knowledge? The title of my talk today is Curiouser and Curiouser. That is, of course, from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, published in 1866 by Lewis Carroll, pen name for the mathematician and taker of disturbing photographs, Charles Ludwig Dodson. Alice goes to Wonderland because she's curious. In chapter 2 of the book, we learn Alice's response as she grows 10 feet tall. "Curiouser and curiouser," cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for a moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. "Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet." Or when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were getting far off. "Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears. I'm sure I shan't be able. I shall be a great deal too far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage the best way you can, but I must be kind to them," thought Alice, "or perhaps they won't walk the way I want to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas." And she went on planning to herself how she would manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought, and how funny it'll seem sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, Esquire. Hearthrug, near the fender, with Alice's love. Now, you see how she's going with it, right? She's not refusing this new knowledge, she's just figuring it out. Lewis Carroll created a lasting literary character by going with something that males have long feared in females, curiosity. Roughly a century later, this point wasn't lost on Grace Slick, lead singer of the psychedelic rock band Jefferson Airplane, when she wrote that iconic psychedelic song, When Logic and Proportion Have Fallen Sloppy Dead, and the white knight is talking backwards and the red queen's off her head. Remember what the dormouse said. Feed your head. Feed your head. Drugs to explore forbidden knowledge, or the forbidden knowledge that drugs can release in the human mind. It's a thought that has occurred to a few people since the beginning of humanity, and it has often been condemned and outlawed. The writers of South Park keyed into that difference between curiosity and fear to the point of boredom, in their school guidance counselor, Mr. Mackey. Drugs are bad, okay? Mr. Mackey is the gatekeeper. Drugs are bad, okay? I got to work on it. All right. Okay? A lot of us have met a Mr. Mackey along the way of our religious journey. Here's what I know about a lot of you in this room today, because I've talked about this with several of you. You started out your religious journey by asking quite innocent questions. At least you thought they were innocent. Why did God make people? Why do people look different? Why is there evil in the world? Will I be able to get French fries in heaven? If God is everywhere, why do we have to go to church? Does God have any friends? Do animals go to heaven? Does God take naps? How come God is invisible? Do some people really hear God talking to them? Why do people die? Why do people die young? Or one of mine, if God loves us Pentecostals best, how come all them Presbyterians are rich and everybody in our church is poor? Didn't add up. For many of us along the way, some religious authority, like Mr. Mackey said, questions are bad, okay? That's why our number one goal in our religious education program here at First Unitarian Society is to encourage curiosity rather than fear. We ask questions, and we are sex positive, which you'll be hearing about from some of our young folk next week. Well, should any knowledge be forbidden? And it is a complex question. For many of us, many harmful things are actually unthinkable. We literally wouldn't think of it. But now, we don't need a Pandora or an Eve to bring us forbidden knowledge. We have the internet, for good and for ill. For example, there was recently an incident in the United Kingdom in which a teenager prone to self-harm learned more extreme forms of self-harm on Instagram. More and more extreme self-harm until she apparently inadvertently killed herself. As the American novelist Cormac McCarthy puts it in the words in your order of service this morning, just remember that the things you put into your head are there forever. Hence PTSD. Now we have the IDW, the intellectual dark web. This is a group of mostly white male college professors who espouse sexist, racist, and or right-wing ideologies. You just do a little web search. They have become heroes to mostly white male college students. You can even buy an IDW t-shirt or hoodie if you're so inclined. Now, the way to combat those ideas is not to suppress them, but to openly debate them, I would argue. They are framing their opinions as forbidden knowledge when actually it's just bad scholarship. So when is managing information a legitimate act of protecting? When is managing information an act of curating, like, being an editor? And when is managing information an act of censorship? We, as a collective society, don't know the answers to these questions. The amount of information we have available to us has far outpaced our ability to manage that information. China has an idea. The U.S. has an idea. Facebook management has another idea. Julian Assange has another idea. And we're seeing an interesting debate just now among journalists as to whether cutting and pasting information without reading it is journalism. You notice that argument? It's an interesting argument. Finally, the questions boil down to this. Who is doing the forbidding and why? Who is keeping some knowledge out of the hands of some people for some reason? No, I don't have an answer to all the questions I've been asking today, but we can look at the evidence of the past. Despite a terrifying political apparatus of torture, murder, and press control, the Roman Catholic Church ultimately could not stop the flow of forbidden information. I was once chatting with another Unitarian minister with the last name of Breeden, and we were trying to figure out if we had any common relations. One of his stories was of a family member, a French Huguenot, who escaped Catholic France to Protestant England by baking his outlawed Protestant Bible in a loaf of bread. People are clever like that. Suppressing thought is like squishing jelly. The harder you push, the more spread out it gets. In the Western world, white male patriarchy has done a lot of suppressing of knowledge for a very long time. This isn't ancient history, as you know. The recent attempts of the church to suppress the clergy sex scandal is only another lesson in how censorship works, how much damage it does in keeping secrets, and how forbidding knowledge ultimately fails. The current wave of anti-choice legislation is an attempt to forbid access to knowledge. It's just another chapter in the long story of forbidding knowledge to curious women. Look at so many of our social problems today. Just think of, schools. Just think about the problems. And underlying them is an attempt to forbid knowledge to women and people of color. As our nation and our world grow curiouser and curiouser in our new age, our call is to use that thing our forebears got kicked out of church for using. Our brains, our ability to think freely. The best way to stamp out a bad idea is to offer a better one. One thing is clear. Our world needs a lot less fear and a lot more curiosity.